What is up, guys? We are here today at the Nucleus Hub, and I'm truly excited because I have a special guest who she's going to be one of our speakers at the Connetic Event on May 31st. She's truly amazing what she does, provides a lot of value in the legal, especially on the legal side of the creator economy, and I can't wait to have an amazing conversation with her. Please help me welcome Cristina Scarano. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank
I'm
you for
doing
that
great.
lovely introduction.
Of course, you deserve it. I first of all, I just want to say thank you for your time, and I'm really looking forward to having you as one of our speakers at our Kinetic event. I'm sure our audience is going to get tremendous value from that, and that's why I'm excited to be able to come and chat with you today to learn more about you and how'd you really get started into this whole field.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a little bit of background. I graduated from the University of Miami School of Law in 2006. And by that point, I already knew that I wanted to work in the media space. And my first job right out of law school was at Telemundo Network Group. So I spent 5 years there working in like the business and legal affairs department, doing all kinds of contracts with talent, production, development for reality shows. So I always say I learned so much because I worked with so many different people in like different areas of the business. So I would assist with like on sports shows as well, the news division. It was really, really fascinating time. And then from there, I went straight to Fremantle Media, which is a British production company that owns the licenses to the big franchises, which we would call the big shiny floor programs like Got Talent, Idol, X Factor. And that was really production work. So being on the ground at these big reality shows, handling all kinds of production legal matters, doing all of the contestant agreements, talent agreements for the judges and the hosts, and also managing outside counsel throughout Latin America. And then from there, I spent 5 years there at Fremantle Media, and then I spent another 5 years at BBC Studios, which is the commercial arm of the British Broadcasting Corporation. And BBC Studios produces content in the UK and distributes it internationally. So I led the business and legal affairs department for Latin America and US Hispanic, meaning we would localize BBC shows, translate them to Spanish, and distribute them to networks and streamers. And then from there, I spent a couple years at Spotify, and I was supporting the podcast business, so doing agreements with producers and creators and working on podcast shows. And I've just recently, about 4 months ago, joined Jayaram Law as partner.
That's a pretty hefty resume right there.
I know.
Congrats on all your success.
Thank you.
Truly amazing. And I think it just goes to show, why somebody would need to be working with you, especially with, the different areas that you've been in. I'm sure you can probably say, I've taken so much of that experience and I've applied it to some of the things that you see today. And as you continue to evolve. Now, you did mention something that stuck out to me, Spotify. And I know that, podcasting is a huge industry in itself. Obviously, a certain sector within the whole creator economy and content creating space. It's just one of the ways to create content. Now, reason why I bring that up is because, over here, at Nucleus, we do a lot of podcasting. We do short form, we do long form, we do live streaming, we do all sorts of content, but podcast is a big thing. And, one of the biggest things that I see when it comes to podcasting is a lot of people don't know, but, podcasting usually 80%. So there's a stat that about 80% of people that do podcasting do it for about 6 months to a year, and then they drop out. And then usually it's that 20% that will continue on. And it's one of those things where I feel that it's because a lot of times, when they, and this is something that in my last conversation that I had with your partner Vivek was, a lot of times is, when people become creators and they're building their brand, they always forget to bring the lawyer in from the beginning or have them be part of their team from the start. And later on is when they start bringing them in. And I feel like in the podcasting space, you create your own show, your brand, your this and that. But I think that along the route where a lot of people get discouraged is because they don't know how to monetize their podcast. They don't know how to bring in revenue. They don't know how to work. They don't know how to bring the right brands in, or even work with the right brands to get the right deals in place and all that stuff. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why people get discouraged. Now, being at Spotify and being in this space, what would, and obviously, doing what you're doing now, working with creators and other, renowned individuals, what would you say is the most important thing when it comes to that and setting yourself up and working with you, and just your experience on being able to guide somebody who has a podcast or creates content, and be able to involve the lawyer from the beginning? What are some of the things that would immediately help that individual to start bringing in revenue, scaling their brand and business?
Well, I think so. Two things come to mind. One, not so much related to the law, but what you said is, about 80% of people sort of abandoning their podcast after the first year. Podcasting is not easy. There's a lot of work. And I think that there's this idea that you're just sort of talking into a microphone, but it's actually a lot of work. And it's very similar to a TV production, which is partly why Spotify brought me in, because my TV experience. So a lot of the contracts look like TV production agreements. There's a lot of editing and a lot of time that goes into podcasts. So I think that's something to be aware of also. And it's also important to have like a regular cadence to podcasting. So you can't just drop a podcast every, now and again. Typically what works is like a weekly show or a daily show. So it is a lot of work. Then in terms of bringing a lawyer, and what I saw when I was at Spotify, at least in Latin America, was that a lot of people, because this was sort of a new-ish genre that could be debated, because obviously radio has been around for a long time and similar sort of format, but because a lot of people are just sort of doing this that may not have a lot of experience, they typically weren't represented. They didn't have a lawyer, walking them through the agreement. And then, so just generally speaking, you talk about monetization of content. That's something that is very important when you're entering into a deal. Unfortunately, a big platform historically wouldn't acquire the rights to a podcast unless they had monetization rights. And one of the ways that you can get around doing that is just by deciding that you're not going to be exclusive and just producing and really exploiting the podcast on your own. So controlling the monetization rights that way. But of course, that means that you have to have, the infrastructure and the business knowledge to pursue those partnerships and those advertisers. So there's a lot of work, right? So if you listen, a small podcast is typically not going to be acquired by a big streamer. But if you're, having some success as a podcaster and you're approached about going to exclusively to a platform, there is the benefit of getting perhaps a flat fee for that production. But in exchange, you are typically giving up your rights to monetize the content. You may also be giving up your intellectual property rights, which is critical. So I think you have to do that. You have to do that balance. And sometimes a lawyer isn't so much just looking at the words in the contract, but advising a client on the best business strategy for them going forward. So if you do enter into this deal, you can't monetize your own content. Yes, you have a contract for 2 or 3 years and you're going to be getting this flat fee and it's guaranteed. But on the flip side, you lose X, Y, and Z rights, monetization, intellectual property. You may not be able to take the podcast elsewhere if it's canceled. And then it just sits there and nobody's exploiting it. So I think a lawyer can really consult on the business aspects as well, as to whether it even makes sense to enter into an exclusive agreement for a podcast, or whether a podcaster really thinks that they can, make it and just go on their own.
Totally. No, and all amazing things you touched upon there, which, I know it's super important, which if you really think about it, the lawyer is almost playing lawyer/business strategist. And if I guess for anybody who's has the brand and business, you got to look at it in that way, where it's like you're bringing more value than just, hey, I'm just here to look at contracts and protect you and this, and it's like I'm actually going to help you with the direction of where your business can go and guide you in the best way for your brand and you. So I really like that you mentioned that. Now, when it comes to the podcasting, you touched upon, for example, somebody, give over their rights of their show to like a Spotify or to, a big platform. Let's talk about, for example, the deal that, Joe Rogan had done with Spotify, right? So that's really only the 1%ers of the world, right? Of the
Less than
1%,
that, yeah.
less than, right? 0 point something percent.
Absolutely.
And I know that doesn't come across all the time. Now, again, what you kind of talked about, which, for those who are not doing that, product deals and other kind of, negotiations and monetizing from the actual platform itself. What are some of the things that you're seeing now in that space that is helping those, I would say, the majority of podcasters who, heck, you might have some who are making maybe $50,000 a year, 10,000, maybe 100, maybe 200, but they're not going to get picked up by a Spotify. What are some of the recommendations you would give them to start putting them in a direction where, who knows, maybe they can one day land a Spotify deal or another company that's interested in taking over their show? What are some steps that you would say, this is where you should start, and then start going in this direction?
Yeah, well, I think it's important also to give context to the conversation now, because podcasting had this boom, right? And it's kind of crashed a bit. So even like the Joe Rogan deals and all the deals that the streamers were doing with either big podcasters or just podcasters that a streamer identified as, or an influencer, say that a streamer identified as someone that could potentially be very good at podcasting. Those deals are few and far between. I don't think the streamers are really investing in podcasters the way that they used to be during that sort of podcasting boom. So my advice to people, and the podcasters I've seen that do very, very well financially, are the ones that have really treated it like a business and actually have their own people dedicated to advertising, dedicated to finding those sponsorships. So it's not just, let me start a podcast and see if somebody picks it up, because that's really not, it's just not happening anymore. But it's a matter of really treating it like a business and being ready to like either hire somebody to help you with that or take that into your own hands. And it's a lot of work.
Totally. No, I agree with you. Being a podcaster myself, I had a podcast for 3.5 years, and I had to pause it so I can focus on Nucleus, because I wasn't going to be able to handle both Nucleus podcasting and my other business. And I had to put a pause to it, and it took a lot of work. It took a lot of time. I had tremendous opportunities getting in front of some renowned individuals and brand opportunities. I was pumping 3 episodes a week.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, it was crazy. There was days where I would literally front load about 5 people in a row. And I would do 5-6 hours in a row of podcasting without getting up, without maybe 2-minute, 3-minute intervals in between. So I know that the hardships and dedication that it can take. And again, it's, the chances of getting to that 0 point something percent, even being a great podcaster, good podcaster, is very, very slim. So, bring that up. I know that was a good point, because I know sometimes we tend to say, this is where I gotta be in. And sometimes we don't realize that, hey, not that you can't, but, you might want to focus here so you can start generating here, building here, and then maybe sometime you can get picked up. Now, you talked about the podcast boom. There was a podcast boom, and then there was kind of like a dip. And then I know about a few months ago, there were some articles coming out how podcast is kind of making a comeback, not the same way that it did before, but it's making it in a different way. Gary Vee's talked about it. Some of these other people have talked about it. What is your intake on that? Have you seen anything on that? What is your thoughts? Where do you think the podcast industry is going to go in the near future? Just because I know that there is kind of like that talk now where podcast is coming back up. It's just not going to be the same like it was.
Yeah, no, I think that podcasts are definitely still around. I listen to podcasts regularly. I don't think they're going anywhere. I think that boom of thinking that a streamer will pick you up and pay you millions of dollars for a podcast, I do think that's over, except for the 0.00001% that make it to that level. So I don't think that podcasts are necessarily going anywhere. I think that where it's headed and where it's been going is more of the YouTube model, where a creator, and this is all part of the creator economy, and platforms are getting savvy to this, which is that, you know, creators take this, they create their own content, and then they just, via dynamic ad insertions, receive a check at the end of the month or whatever. And I think that's really where platforms are headed. I think it's the YouTube model.
Great pointers. And, you know, as soon as we start wrapping up, you know, our conversation, what are some like quick do's, don'ts that you would say are important to keep in mind as a creator overall? It doesn't have to just be a podcaster, but as a creator overall, quick do's and don'ts. And then where would you like to see the creator economy go? Where would you like to see it? And maybe where you like to see it isn't where it's going, and it's going in another direction. And if so, can you explain?
Well, I think I think the creator economy is great. Listen, I think it gives a platform, and it's wider opportunity for more people and more diverse people. So I think that it's a very positive thing. And even just speaking, you know, thinking about professionally what Jayaram's doing with like creating content for Instagram, and, you know, we're lawyers. It's not necessarily the most fascinating topic for a lot of people, but creating content in a way that makes what we do in that content accessible to more people and more interesting to people. I think, you know, platforms like Instagram and the creator economy, and now that that's part of, you know, this, everybody's used to seeing these videos, allowing lawyers to create these kinds of videos is very helpful for marketing, and also for educating people that wouldn't otherwise have access to, you know, our experience or knowledge base.
Awesome. And, you know, I think that what's going to be really cool about this event that you're going to be speaking at is that you're going to see a lot of our audience is going to see being created themselves, that there's so much more to what they think content creation is, to what the creator economy is, and understanding that there's a whole other world to it, that you guys provide so much massive value. And that's why I'm truly excited to be able to have you here with the other speakers. Now, what are you truly looking forward to, you know, at the Connetic event on May 31st?
I think it'll be great to meet people in the community that are passionate about the creator economy, hear about what they're doing, exchange ideas. And you always learn from other people that are doing, you know, these kinds of things. So business owners, entrepreneurs, I mean, it's fascinating. There's so many people doing this, and there's so much going on in Miami right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just fascinating to get these people together and learn.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you. Cristina, where can people find you, connect with you, plug yourself away?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram as Cristina_Scarano, and on LinkedIn as Cristina Scarano.
Awesome. Well, we are truly looking forward to having you there. Guys, May 31st, 6:30 p.m. It's going to be amazing. You want to be there. So much value. You're going to get tremendous insight on the legal side of the creator economy, and you'll be able to have a chance to interact with these amazing speakers and create content. So we definitely want to see you there. Cristina, thank you. Can't wait to be able to experience your speech, and myself learn from you and be able to ask you some questions too.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.